Even the biggest animal lovers can still be shocked by some animals' behavior. This old dog approached a dying orphaned foal. You won't believe what happened next. But before we start, if you enjoy this story, please subscribe and like the video for more amazing stories. It was one of the most exciting times on the horse farm in Alabama. They were expecting a new arrival. Summer the mare was pregnant and her baby could be born soon. Claire, the owner of the farm, couldn't wait to see the new baby. All the animals on the farm are treated more like pets than farm animals, and Summer was one of Claire's favorites. The birth was easy and her foal, Buck, was healthy. Claire was there for the whole birth and Summer didn't struggle. She even got to see how quickly the foal stood up. For around a week, everything was going well. Summer was feeding Buck and looking after him as a new mother should. Every time that Claire and her dog, Rocky, went to the barn, Buck would be eating and acting exactly like a horse foal should. And Summer was doing great, but then things just fell apart. They had fed the horses and everything was perfect. But when Claire and Rocky got to the barn in the morning, something was seriously wrong with Summer. She had broken out in sweats and was shivering uncontrollably. She hadn't done any physical activities that could account for her condition, so Claire was immediately worried. Summer was healthy when they left her, and now she was really sick. In the corner of the stall, little Buck looked scared and a little lost. He didn't know what was going on with his mom. They called the vet, who gave her medicine, and for 2 days the horse fought to get better. She was even feeding her baby when she could. Claire helped out there too. She gave him some replacement milk when he needed it. They were at the stables all the time during those few days. But then, the third day, she knew that this was not a battle that they would win. Buck laid down in a corner and looked terribly sad. That was when something incredible happened. Rocky, the Australian cattle dog, stepped up. He had never really cared about the horses, but he must have known what was coming because he went to lay down next to Buck and licked him. Claire cried when she saw the empathy her dog was showing the foal, and then she cried when she examined the mare. Summer was not going to make it. She was in a lot of pain. They were going to be forced to euthanize the horse. It's never an easy decision to make, but when a horse has a baby that's only a few days old, it's even more heartbreaking, and it puts the life of the foal in danger too. They took the foal to another stall and Rocky went with him. It was gut-wrenching. From then on, Rocky had adopted the foal. But one day the dog approached the foal, and you won't believe what happened next. Rocky barked at Claire and the rest of the farm workers. He wanted to get their attention. When she went to check it out, Buck seemed fine. But Rocky was so insistent that she checked that turned out that he had a low-grade fever, and in the next few hours, it got worse. They wouldn't have realized that Buck was sick too, at least not so early if it wasn't for the dog. He was an orphaned foal, and now he was sick from the same bug his mother had. Was he going to die too? They hoped not. The mother was weak from giving birth, so she deteriorated very quickly. But the baby was very young. They started treating him right away for that first fever. Rocky was acting like this was his own baby. They hoped that they wouldn't break Rocky's heart in the end. The dog was already grieving his best friend. He had lost his best dog friend of many years, just a few weeks before that. Ever since, Rocky hadn't shown any interest in playing, and he had barely been eating. They had been worried about him for weeks. The foal gave him a new mission in life. If it didn't end well, then the poor dog was going to pay the price. Rocky had never slept outside in his life. He strictly slept inside in Claire's room, but when it was time to go to bed that night, he refused to leave the foal. Buck was orphaned and he was very sick. He wasn't going to leave his dying baby all on his own. Worried about the dog, Claire tried to get him to come inside, but he wouldn't do it. Claire couldn't even convince him to come inside for dinner. She had to bring it out to him. They all fought hard to get the foal back to health. They all desperately wanted a different outcome for him than his mother had. Claire went to check on them every few hours throughout the night. Finally, at around 4 a.m., he seemed to be doing better, and Claire could fall into an exhausted sleep. Then she was awoken suddenly by the sound of the dog barking. Walking outside, she was shocked. Rocky and Buck were playing outside the barn in the pasture. The foal was doing a lot better, but that wasn't the end of the dog and the foal's story. It was only just the beginning. Their friendship was going to go a long way. They were playing, and from that moment on, the foal started getting stronger. Rocky made sure of it. He would nudge the horse until he got up and started playing with him. They ran together in the pasture, and the foal got stronger. When he sat down and got ready for a nap, then Rocky would lie with him and lick him. It was really sweet to see, and the videos of the unlikely friendship has brought a smile to many people's faces. Buck couldn't just keep drinking milk, and he started feeding out of a bucket too. The horse began to thrive, and Claire knew that a lot of that was because of the dog taking care of the horse. Without his friendship, the horse might not have made it, and he would have even less of a chance of thriving. The relationship was special, but it made what would happen later even scarier and even more potentially tragic. Rocky stayed with Buck as much as possible. Normally, he would play with Claire all day and all over the farm, but since Buck was there, he spent just as much time playing in the pasture with the horse. He was like the father and the best friend of the horse, and he was the protector too, even though Rocky was a lot smaller than Buck. His protective instinct got him in a lot of trouble a while later. One day, Claire and her farm hands were all working all over the farm when something made them run to the pasture in front of Buck's barn. They heard terrible noises coming from the pasture. The dog was barking in a way that they had never heard him bark before. There was an urgency that made Claire's blood run cold. He was angry, but he sounded scared too. On the other hand, Buck was moaning too. The horse was normally very quiet and didn't vocalize much, but they could hear his screams from all over the farm. Everyone rushed to them as quickly as they could, and what they saw was terrifying. The dog was standing in front of the horse, protecting him. A large snake stood up in front of them both, challenging the animals. They could see how aggressive the snake was, and they had to tread before the humans could even react. The snake attacked them. He was going for Buck, but Rocky would not allow it. Rocky jumped in between them. This wasn't the first time that they had snakes on the farm. Normally, they avoided people and tried to get away as quickly as possible. If they did get too close and they became a danger, then the farm hands would catch them and take them to be released far away. This wasn't even the first time that Rocky had a showdown with a snake. Normally, the snake would take the easy way out and go away. Carlum didn't like hurting any animals, but there had been times when they found the dog with a snake he had already disposed of. There was a time when the dog was fast enough to destroy a snake in seconds. But now that he was getting older, he was just too slow to react quickly enough and avoid catastrophe. He was also not as focused as he usually would be. When he was facing a snake on his own, all his focus would have been on the snake in front of him and his next moves. But now he was trying to watch out for the horse, and he might even have seen the people running towards them. He was distracted, and this snake was really angry and aggressive. There was a lot of space for him to retreat, but he wasn't interested. It looked like they wanted the fight, and they could do nothing to stop him. As he lunged at Buck, Rocky jumped in the way and grabbed the snake. He shook him and threw him away from them. The snake was going all over the place, but he wasn't backing down either. He was aggressive and he was ready to fight. Then Rocky threw him and the people could get closer. Buck had been jumping up and down, and they had to calm him down and see where the snake went. They meant to grab him and release him in a field, but when they saw him, they realized that he was badly injured and they couldn't save him. But while the farmhands tried to deal with the snake, Claire turned back to her dog and horse, and her heart dropped. In the pasture was Buck standing over Rocky and trying to nudge him. Rocky wouldn't wake up. The horse tried getting him to stand. It was heartbreaking to see how desperately the horse was trying to convince his friend to wake up. Claire was terrified. Had Rocky died trying to protect his adopted baby? She rushed closer and was relieved to see that the dog was still breathing, but he was in bad shape. His leg had 2 wounds where the snake had bitten him. There was no time to spare. She had to get Rocky to the vet as quickly as possible before the venom had time to spread. She picked him up and placed him gently in her car, which was luckily close by. But Buck had other ideas. He didn't want them to take his friend away from him. He might not have realized that they were trying to help. The dog was a hero because it was the second time he saved Buck's life, and they all knew how strong the bond was between the dog and the horse. But there was no time to consider Buck's feelings in those moments. Every second could be the difference between saving or losing Rocky. One of the farm hands had to restrain the foal, allow Claire to drive away without his interference. The vet started treating Rocky as soon as they arrived. He was lucky to be bitten on the leg because there was more bone and less tissue, and not as much of the venom penetrated and went into the body. It also didn't spread as quickly. Claire got him to the vet within minutes of the fight, and that gave him a better chance, too. The vet started giving Rocky medicine right away and cut away some of the already damaged tissue. They wanted to make sure that he lived. They also wanted to help him keep his leg. And after that, all they could do was wait. They would clean the wound often and keep him on 4 medicine. But the dog would have to fight to get better. He was asleep, and they would keep him calm. But it was a waiting game. In the meantime, Rocky wasn't the only animal that Claire and her team had to worry about. Buck wasn't a happy horse either. He refused to eat, and he seemed very depressed. He didn't even want them petting him, and that was one of his favorite things. They tried to hand feed him some of his favorite snacks like apples or carrots, but he wasn't interested. He wouldn't come out of his stall to play. The poor horse had only seen the shape his friend was in, and he probably thought that Claire took him away because they couldn't save him. Buck wouldn't survive on water for long. They hoped they could show him his friend before he started getting sick. But that would all depend on how well Rocky recovered. Would his leg become infected and septic? For a few days, he did seem very sick. There were even a few minutes that he stopped breathing. But slowly, the medicine started to work and he could come out of sedation a little bit at a time. When he was finally awake, the dog was very happy to see Claire, and he loved all the attention he was getting. His leg wound was still red, but there were no pieces of tissue that were dying. Instead, the wound seemed to be healing up nicely too. It was a massive relief to everyone who loved the dog. They just wished that Buck could know that his friend was doing better. The horse was still sulking terribly. As soon as the dog could stand on his own, he didn't want to be cooped up in a little enclosure indoors anymore. He wasn't used to being in the vet's office. Thinking of Buck and how anxious Rocky was there, the vet made a compromise. The dog could go home, as long as they could keep him quiet and not on his leg too much. His pain meds would make him groggy anyway, and he needed the rest. But that all flew out the door when they got to the farm. Claire wanted to walk around and open the door for the dog, but as soon as they stopped, he jumped out of the window and rushed to the barn. As soon as Buck saw the dog coming, he started to dance and get excited. He put his head down to the horse, who kept licking him. It wasn't clear who was happier to see each other, the horse or the dog, but all the people who were watching the happy reunion had tears in their eyes from the joy of it. They wanted to spend a lot of time with each other, but keeping in mind what the vet said, Claire made sure that Rocky came inside to sleep, and during the day, she put his bed out in the pasture under the trees. This time, it was the horse that laid down with him, cuddling him until he was fully healed. This special friendship had carried both of them through some of the hardest things in life. And now, they could both finally heal. What do you think about this story? Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more.